Every day, a young boy walked into the same flower shop, his small hands clutching a few crumpled bills. Without fail, he would pick the freshest bouquet, pay for it with quiet determination, and hurry out the door. The cashier, a kind-hearted woman who had worked there for years, couldn't help but notice his routine. What could drive someone so young to buy flowers daily? Her curiosity grew with every visit, but the boy's shy demeanor made it hard to ask. One day, as he handed over his money and carefully carried his bouquet, something in his expression tugged at her heart. It wasn't just the routine that intrigued her anymore. It was the look in his eyes, filled with both purpose and sadness. She decided to follow him. What she discovered left her overwhelmed, her heart heavy with emotion. In that moment, everything clicked. The boy's actions, the meaning behind the flowers, and the reason he came back every single day. It wasn't what she expected, and it changed her forever. But what did she see? And why did it bring her to tears? Stay tuned as we unravel this touching story of love, loss, and the small acts that carry the deepest meaning. The cashier followed the boy at a careful distance, her heart pounding as she tried to stay unnoticed. He walked quickly, clutching the bouquet tightly against his chest, as if afraid to lose it. His small frame disappeared around a corner, and when she caught up, she saw him heading into a quiet neighborhood park. She paused for a moment, unsure if she should continue. Something told her this wasn't just about flowers. The boy finally stopped near a bench beneath a large oak tree. He knelt by a small, makeshift memorial, a collection of faded pictures, candles, and notes tucked into the grass. Gently, he placed the fresh bouquet among the items, his movements slow and deliberate. The woman watched from a distance, her throat tightening as she tried to piece together the story. Was it for a friend? A family member? Whoever it was, they clearly meant the world to him. As she observed, she noticed the boy closing his eyes and whispering softly, though she couldn't make out the words. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, he looked far older than his years. What was the story behind this memorial? And why was he the only one visiting it? The cashier stood frozen, torn between stepping forward and staying hidden. She didn't want to intrude on such an intimate moment, but her heart ached to understand what brought this young boy to this spot every single day. As she watched, the boy pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He smoothed it out carefully, placed it beside the flowers, and sat silently for a while, his gaze fixed on the memorial. The paper fluttered in the breeze, and for a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of what looked like a child's handwriting. Was it a letter? A drawing? Whatever it was, it seemed deeply personal. She couldn't help but wonder, why was he always alone? Where were his parents? The neighborhood was quiet, and there were no other visitors in sight. The thought crossed her mind that maybe this memorial was for someone close to him, someone who had left a void he was trying to fill with these small, consistent gestures. The boy stood up suddenly, brushing his hands on his pants as if ready to leave. But as he turned, his eyes briefly locked onto hers. In that fleeting moment, her heart raced. Did he see her? Did he know she had followed? The boy's eyes lingered on her for a moment before he looked away, his expression unreadable. He turned and walked toward the park's exit, his pace faster now, as if trying to escape unseen. The cashier hesitated, but couldn't ignore the pull to follow him again. There was something about his quiet determination, the way he carried himself, that made her feel this was bigger than just a simple act of mourning. She trailed him down the winding streets, careful to stay far enough behind. The boy seemed to know exactly where he was going, weaving through alleys and side streets, until he reached a small house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. He paused at the gate, looking back over his shoulder. Her heart skipped a beat had he spotted her. But he didn't linger. Instead, he pushed open the gate and disappeared inside. The woman stood across the street, her curiosity now an unstoppable force. Through a gap in the curtains, she caught a glimpse of him inside. He wasn't alone. An older man sat slumped in a chair, his face drawn and tired. The boy approached him, speaking softly, but the man didn't respond. Who was he? And what was his connection to the flowers and the memorial? The pieces of the puzzle were almost coming together, but something still didn't add up. The cashier lingered across the street, her heart pounding as she pieced together what little she had seen. The boy's actions were deliberate, purposeful, but the older man inside the house seemed defeated, almost lifeless. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than grief. It felt heavier, like an unspoken burden. As she stood there, debating whether to leave or knock on the door, a sudden movement caught her eye. The boy emerged from the house, this time without the sullen air he carried at the park. Instead, his steps were quick, almost frantic, as if he was rushing against time. He didn't notice her as he disappeared down the street again, heading in the opposite direction. Curiosity turned into a need for answers. Summoning her courage, the cashier approached the house and gently knocked. The door creaked open slightly, revealing the older man. Up close, his exhaustion was even more apparent. Dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling as he gripped the doorframe. He looked at her with suspicion and weariness, but before she could explain herself, he spoke in a hoarse voice. "You're here about the boy, aren't you?" he said, his words cutting through the air like a sharp blade. "You have no idea what he's doing, do you?" Her stomach dropped. What could he mean? And why did it sound like a warning? The cashier froze at the man's words, unsure how to respond. He opened the door wider, his tired eyes searching hers, and motioned for her to come inside. The house was dimly lit and quiet, with only the sound of an old clock ticking in the corner. The man sighed heavily and sat back in his chair, his voice breaking as he began to speak. "That boy, he's been carrying a weight no child should bear," the man said. "The memorial you saw, it's for his mother. She passed away a year ago, right there in that park. She used to take him there every day after school. It was their place." The cashier felt a lump rise in her throat as the pieces fell into place. The flowers, the daily visits, he was keeping her memory alive in the only way he knew how. But the man's next words sent a chill down her spine. "He doesn't just buy flowers for her," the man continued. "He's been selling his toys, his belongings, anything he can spare, to make sure he never misses a day." Tears welled in her eyes as she thought of the boy's quiet resilience. But before she could respond, the man added one final twist. "He thinks no one notices, but I do. And I know why he's doing it," the man said, his voice trembling. "He overheard me once, saying I couldn't afford a proper headstone for her grave. That's why he does it. He's saving up, one flower at a time." The weight of the story hit her like a wave, leaving her speechless. As the boy returned home, carrying another small bundle of flowers, the cashier vowed she wouldn't let him carry this burden alone. The next day, she made her own quiet visit to the park, this time with a bouquet in hand, and a promise to help the boy finish what he'd started. The next morning, the boy walked into the flower shop as usual, but this time, the cashier greeted him with a warm smile and a gentle question. "Would you let me help you pick the flowers today?" she asked. The boy hesitated but nodded shyly. Together, they chose the brightest bouquet, and she slipped in a few extra blooms without charging him. After he left, she began spreading the story to her regular customers, careful to protect the boy's privacy, but sharing enough to inspire their kindness. Slowly, donations started pouring in, small bills, coins, even heartfelt notes from strangers who wanted to help. Within weeks, the cashier and the older man were able to purchase a beautiful headstone for the boy's mother. On the day it was placed at the memorial, the boy stood in awe, his small hands tracing the engraved letters. Tears filled his eyes, but this time they weren't just from sadness. They were from gratitude. As the cashier watched from a distance, the boy turned to her with a smile that seemed to lighten his burden. Though he would still bring flowers to the park, now he wouldn't have to do it alone. A community had come together, turning his quiet struggle into a shared act of love and remembrance.